Economics and politics are the foundation of human development.
While forming the world's earliest civilizations, Africans also laid the groundwork for the creation of economic systems.
By learning from our history, we gain the strength to empower the present and design the future. Presenting the premier forum for truth, culture, and change, HAPI Talks. Join us as we unlock the secrets to our success.
Peace, peace, peace. What's going on, happy family? Thank you for tuning in. We got another good show coming up. Got my brother Asar Imhotep coming up. He's going to talk to us about the power of sound, all right, in ancient times in Kemet. But before we do that, just want to make sure that everybody like, share, subscribe, comment on the video. Very important that you comment. We tell you guys that all the time. Feel free to get in that chat, ask the questions, make your statements. Just keep them clean. All right, just keep them clean. I know y'all like to debate inside the comments. You know, that's all good. Just keep them clean. Don't be disrespectful. All right. I'll also check out our clearance sale. We got the HAPI shirts here. If you can see this, got the HAPI shirts. We got some hoodies. We got a couple of hats left, a few things. We're trying to get the inventory out so we can get some new inventory in. All right. Also, don't forget to subscribe to us. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. All right. That's HAPI Film on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Also, help us to get to 40K. We right there. We about maybe 30, I think we about 38,000, like 38,200, something like that. Yeah, help us get to 40. That's going to be a big deal for us. All right. So subscribe and then send it out to a friend. Have that friend send it out to another friend. Also, check out our film. We got a dope film, HAPI Film, on Amazon Prime, Quaily TV, and Tubi. You might want to get that, talk about economics. We go into the historical beginnings of economics. So check that out when you get a chance. Also subscribe to our newsletter. Our newsletter will keep you informed and up to date with upcoming things that we have in store for y'all. We got some resources for y'all in there. We have some articles on health. We have the sister talking about crystals and stones, how it could be beneficial to you. We got my man Mwebe Ashangi enlightening us on his books and his knowledge. So check us out. Just go to HAPI Film, click Stay Connected, and you'll be connected for the future. All right. Also, HAPI Love. You know, the HAPI Love is other ways that you can help us out, and that's with the funds. You help us out with the liking and sharing as well. But if you can, donate to our Cash App. That's $, HAPI Film. And, we can use that. We could put it towards some good things in the future. All right. So now let's get to the trip, right? So it's 3 signature experiences, 1 sacred journey. You want to go to Ancient Tours, check that out. We got a trip coming up to Ghana, Togo, Senegal, and Morocco. All right. So we have different packages, right? So let's see. Let me bring up these different packages. So we got these different packages, right? So what you want to do is if you want to go to, let's say you want to go to Senegal, Ghana, and Togo, right? That's from August 20th to August 30th. That's one package. You can go and check the fees on Ancient Tours. Then you have Senegal and Morocco. If you want to just go to Senegal and Morocco, that's August 25th to September 1st. Now, if you want to do everything, that's Senegal, Ghana, Togo, Morocco. That's the complete package. You get everything. You get your airfare is paid up, your airfare, your food, all of that is, you're good on that. All right. And then the good thing about that is if you go to Senegal or Morocco, you'll be we have Robin Walker, esteemed historian from the UK, and he's going to take us through Senegal and Morocco and teach us about the Moors. All right. So that's like the highlight of the trip. Okay. So that's, get with that. And what else we got here? If there's any questions, just put them in the chat. And also, if there's any questions, you can send it to hapifilm.com. All right. So we got my brother, Asar Imhotep. He's coming up. He's going to present for us. Let me get him on the screen here. Let me just take this off. Bear with me, y'all. I don't got my homegirl, Felicia, my partner in crime, to get us off of here. All right. All right. Bear with me, y'all. It's coming. It's coming. There we go. All right, cool. I'm gonna get it, y'all. I'm gonna get it. Don't worry. I'm gonna get it. It's gonna take some time. All right, let me bring my brother Asar Imhotep on the screen. Peace, good brother.
Peace,
How you?
peace, blessing.
Good. I'm here telling the audience, bear with me, because usually I got my partner in crime, Felicia, working the boards, working the ones and twos. So I'm doing it for self right now. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Happy to be back here with happy, pun intended, family, and hoping everyone is doing well, and all blessings due to the HAPI family, those who are catching us live, and of course those who are catching the archives. So have a little bit of information that I'm going to share with you all, and I look forward to your feedback and your questions.
Got you. Wait, so this is, how many times have you been on HAPI Talks?
Probably a million. I'm also in the film. I was at the 2022 trip to
in Detroit.
Well, to the conference in Detroit, and then the trip to Kemet as well. So, as everyone knows, there was supposed to be a conference, a large conference in Aswan in 2022, which included myself, Professor Smalls, Professor James Smalls, who of course is a regular on the HAPI channel, Dr. Theophilo Vega, and a host of others. And so once they saw all of us on the flyer, I call them the Arabized bots, started a campaign to make sure the information like I'm going to give today is not shared in the Nile Valley itself. And so they slowed up some things, but they did not stop the process. So I've been on the channel a long time, numerous times, for any in terms of exact numbers, but it's been a while since I've been on. So again, that's why I'm happy to be here, and probably being introduced to some new members of the HAPI family, and reintroduction, of course, to those who've been rocking with HAPI since the beginning.
Definitely. Yeah, because this is my first time actually meeting you in person. I've seen you do presentations, different presentations, whether it was on your own channel or someone else's channel. I have stayed in tune with you.
Indeed, I appreciate it.
Definitely. So before we even get into the presentation, just so for the people that aren't familiar with you, just give us a little background. Give us like your journey, where you started, how you even, what made you want to get into studying Nile Valley history?
Well, I don't know if we have that much time, but I will say
Yeah.
that, at one point in time, I was a Hebrew Israelite, right?
Hmm.
Which was then the Israeli Church of Universal Practical Knowledge, based out of Harlem, New York.
Hmm.
Uh, but I transitioned out of that philosophy and worldview and started studying deeply in undergrad uh, Africana studies. So I was formally taking African and African American studies courses at the University of Houston. And so you can't take African studies, of course, without knowing about ancient Egypt, ancient Kemet, ancient Mary, whatever name that you want to use.
Hmm.
And so it really kind of started there. But there was also something going on in the 90s as a result of the late Dr. Uh, not Martin Baval, what is his name? Who, yeah, I think it's Martin Baval, who wrote Black Athena, volumes
Bernal,
1 through 3.
yeah, Bernal, yeah.
Bernal, that's it. And of course, there's Diop before him, but here you have a European descendant scholar appearing to agree with Afrocentric scholars in
Mhm.
regards to the racial makeup of the ancient Egyptians. And so, me transitioning, coming out of the paradigm of Hebrew Israelitism, and it's important because at this time, things have changed since the early and mid 90s. Uh, at this time, they were strictly anti-African, meaning like they didn't even see themselves on the continent of Africa.
Yeah,
Now they're trying to identify with Africans and just make them Hebrews. That's a whole totally different debate. Back
yeah,
in my day,
yeah,
uh, it wasn't like that. They was strictly um, they didn't have nothing to do with African people whatsoever. So, but so to come from that and then dead stab, in the middle of these major collegiate debates on the Africanity of ancient Egypt, I was intrigued at the way that the scholars were attacking the questions. And, so it's not like what you would see probably on a Facebook or,
yeah.
on YouTube or something like that, where people just kind of going at each other. They like
Mhm.
they were citing they was like these emails and things that were because back then it was listservs. So before
Mhm.
social media, it was forums and listservs. And
Yeah,
so on the listservs, you would have all these scholars just attacking these problems, and they're showing their book list on whatever points that they were making,
mhm.
and they were reading the text directly. Like, we're going to this papyrus, and this is what it says. So this is my interpretation of this, this, and this. So this is in the 90s. So that really intrigued me, and it encouraged me to start learning the meta nature and how to read it to make arguments and the like. So it is kind of from there, and then while in college, um, I was introduced to the late Dr. Kimbwandende Kiabonseki Fukiao out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, of the
Mhm.
Bakongo people. And he wrote a text, uh, African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo. So by this time, this was a second edition of an earlier text. So this came out like 2000, 2001. And so, but by then I've already had, a good background in ancient Kemet. And while I'm reading his text, he's not talking about Egypt at all. He's talking about his own culture, the Bakongo people.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing things there that are
Mm.
also in Egypt,
Yeah.
right? So that started a whole different trajectory, which led me to learning historical comparative linguistics about
Mm.
Bantu peoples and cultures,
Yeah.
And just over time, it is become kind of what I'm known for in
Yeah.
terms of making these particular connections in a very systematic and scientific way.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to be dealing with today is a continuation of that really kind of strengthens and says not only were the ancient Egyptians Black African people, but
Mhm.
they belong to a particular African universe, right? That while ancient Kemet is unique in their forms of expression, they're not unique totally in terms of their expressions in things, because it belongs to a greater family who have the exact same things.
Gotcha.
But because over time, languages evolve and pronunciations become different,
Yeah.
you won't recognize the same words in the ancient Egyptian language. You may not understand what you're looking at in terms of the iconography and motifs
Yeah.
in on the ancient Egyptian monuments until you get familiar with other groups in Africa, and especially along the Nile, where you'll see their form of expressions,
Mhm.
um, their form of expressions being seen in ancient Kemet, which forces us to have a different conversation in terms of migrations and inheritance,
Yep.
borrowings, what originates where,
Yep.
and the like. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Gotcha. So you went down that rabbit hole and you figured out the continuity of Africa pretty much going down to now.
Exactly. And so it also it helps to this helps in the context of certain arguments by people who swear that well, that's ancient Kemet. That has nothing to do with you, because you, African American, African Caribbean, you
Yeah.
know, are from West Africa,
Yeah.
right? So that has nothing to do with you. Not knowing it does. And so we have evidence and testimonies of migrations west
Hmm.
and migrations east coming into Kemet. See, people don't talk about the people coming into Kemet,
Yeah.
and you're seeing their culture and languages in the hieroglyphic text and the like. And that's the kind of stuff that we deal with, and we try to do it in a it's not we try to we do it in a very serious way, with the anticipation that people are going to try to tear the arguments down, and we force them to yield to the evidence
Yeah.
and not their emotions.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason why there was a campaign against a Professor Smalls, a Theophilo Binga, an
Mhm.
Asar Imhotep, a Dr. Leonard Jeffries,
Yeah. Yeah.
and others coming to the coming to Aswan, having a conference about the Africanness and the relatedness of ancient Kemet to African people, because they know that, okay, they're serious, and this could jeopardize
Yes.
money. That's how they're looking at it. It's not really they know it's not their heritage, and
Hmm.
so we can't give them a platform, so to speak,
Yeah.
to dismantle the master's house, as they would say. uh, so yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And listen, people, don't get it twisted. He's a scholar, but I think I might have seen him sort of breakdancing and punking on Facebook. I think I seen you up rocking. Did I see you up rocking?
A little bit. People know me in various different capacities. So
Gotcha.
whatever name you may know me as
Yeah.
depends on when you met me
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
in the day. So
Yeah.
some people only know me from the poetry scene. I used to go around the country doing, open mic and
Mhm.
being featured doing spoken word poetry, right? But others may know me from the hip hop scene
Yeah. Yeah.
and dancing and things of that nature. And then of course others only know me in this capacity.
Yep.
So, depending on, where you met me and then where you may see me, in a different capacity, they may be shocked. Like, I didn't know you did, that,
Exactly.
you know, that. So yeah, so there's many different aspects to, and that's everyone. You know,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
you know, everybody isn't one. They don't do one thing. They aren't one thing. You know, they're a central power that expresses itself, you know, artistically, intellectually in these different capacities. And you know, part of the challenge of life is to be able to exist in these different spaces and be yourself
Yes.
and thrive and show the world new uh, fundamental ways of being human, right? Through your artwork and through your expressions and things of that nature. So,
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Thank you for that, my brother. All right,
well, that-
so I will bring up the presentation and then you can go do your thing. Every now and then I may jump in and ask a question, but for the most part, I'm gonna just wait till you finish and then ask a few questions.
no problem.
All right.
All righty. So, all righty. So this coming Saturday, well, this coming Thursday through Sunday
Mhm.
is going to be the ASCAC National Conference. And this year it is being held in Washington, D.C. And, you know, ASCAC stands for the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. I believe started in 1984 or 1986. I should know that. One of those two dates. And so um, I submitted an abstract and it was accepted. And the title of the presentation is "The Power of Sound: How Paronymy Shaped Ancient Egyptian Royal Symbolism and Religious Praxis." And I've kind of renamed it a couple of times. That's what I got on the screen. And so, what this particular thing is about is I am currently editing a text in celebration. It's called Paths of Mayat, essays in honor of Dr. Mubai Bingay Bololo. And Dr. Mubai Bingay Bololo is an African scholar out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's part of the Diopian school. He's of that third, what we call um, the well, I guess really kind of second generation, if I can say this. You know, depending on how you calculate that, second or third generation after Diop. If you consider Obinga second generation, or if he's first with Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, right? But he's one of those people that came immediately after Obinga. Same thing with like Om and Digi, uh, Abubakri Musalam, and a few others. And actually, Dr. Abubakri Musalam, for those who are familiar with him, he's going to be, well, I don't know if he's going to be there physically, but he has a presentation. And so if he's still going to be on the continent of Africa, then they may do a video conference just like this. But you know, virtually or physically, he's going to be there at the conference. And you know, he's a major scholar coming out of Senegal. So y'all speaking about Senegal and your trip, y'all definitely need to visit, check out the Diop University, and y'all definitely need to hook up with Dr. Abubakri Musalam, and he speaks English, so you know he'll be able to have a conversation if y'all have that time, if y'all are out. And so I've known of and known him since probably like around 2007. And, you know, he's been one of my major influences and mentors in doing this work. And I use the Chiluba Bantu language. This is his native language, right? And he uses this language to uh, to analyze ancient Egyptian concepts and the like. And the book you kind of see right there is in French towards a Chicam. This is the word we use for Kemet, uh, ancient Egyptian Coptic Luba dictionary. So that's what this text is. So he has many different texts and articles, mainly in French and in German. So those are the primary languages that he writes in. But he also has books in his native Chiluba language. So he's of the Baluba people. Chiluba is the language, just like you have the Waswahili. Kiswahili is the language. So it's uh, understanding those things, right? So uh, this is just a comparison when we talk about Chicam. So I have a whole lesson on that. But when we say Chicam, it can mean the word Kemet itself or the language of Kam, right? And so you have in the Congo still uh, like Bukam and Shikam. These are actual locations in the Congo, just like you have in ancient Egypt. So in ancient Egypt, they would have Kemet, but the T suffix is prefixed in the Chiluba language, and it corresponds to Chi. So we say Chikam, and we use that as a reference to the land itself as well as the language, because Chi can be an abstract prefix denoting a place, and then there's another homonymous Chi that just means language. It is the palatalized Ki in Kiswahili, right? That prefix. Um, and so let me back up a little bit, and so that maybe we'll probably have to. Is that on my screen? No, you would have to do that to unselect. So if there's anything at the bottom, they'll be able to see that comment. There we go. So in 2010, no, in 2008, my bad. There was an international Egyptological conference that was held in Spain. And Dr. Mubai Benge Bololo submitted an abstract with the French title at the bottom, but I translated for y'all as just Ancient Egyptian, a Bantu language, a question less original than Egypt and ancient Greece. I take that back. His abstract that he submitted had to deal with asking the question, is ancient Egyptian language a Bantu language? And it was rejected, but of course, they don't tell you why they rejected it. And so the call for papers for this international conference was asking for original research and things of this nature. But when it came time, when they accepted all of the abstracts, it was kind of the same old, and just stuff about ancient Egypt and Greece, ancient Egypt and the Levant, nothing really new. And so you could say he was in his feelings, or whatnot, that they didn't accept his abstract. But he then wrote an open letter, which is what you see titled on the right-hand side of the screen. So ancient Egyptian, a Bantu language, a question less original than Egypt and ancient Greece. And so the conference is an international conference, but for the most part, everybody that was accepted was white, primarily male from Europe, and a few from the United States. So it's like, how do you have an international conference and nobody from Africa or anybody else is accepted in terms of their papers? I think there was kind of a few that was just actually from the University of Cairo, and they probably only accepted them to stay in the good graces so they can keep coming back to Egypt and exploiting Egypt. But but you know, unbeknownst to him, there was one black person whose paper got accepted, and that was Dr. Mario Beatty with ASCAC. And so, but Mario Beatty doesn't seem like an African name, so nothing stood out. And so, because we know him personally, and I checked the list, he was accepted that year in terms of his paper. So in this open letter, there's a section of there where he challenges the Egyptologists, and he's saying something like, y'all take 30 hours of courses, and now y'all can speak authoritatively on African cultures and languages. All of you who have never been to a king's funeral, who never was involved in a burial, who never been initiated into the African rites, y'all have the caucasity to reject somebody like Bilolo, who speaks and writes in 12 languages. And there was a point in there where he was challenging them, like, who on your committee has the education of a Theophilo Rabinga, of a Mubai Benge Bilolo, of a Om Ndiji, right? And when you go through their education, it is very impressive, right? And of course, these are all people who were educated in the best of European schools, but don't have the qualifications in addition to living the cultures, right? And so there was a point in the conversation where he says that, y'all try to explain ancient Egyptian phenomena from non-African cultures, from your own culture. But me as an African, I don't have to interpret anything when I see it. When I see an alligator or a leopard, that is my double. That is me. That is my power. And this is the same when you go across Africa interpreting the leopard and leopard skins. And so he kind of drops it from there and then goes on into some other stuff. But so this rung bells in my head when I first read it, because I know of this phenomenon called paronymy, which we're going to get into a little bit later. So this is kind of the backdrop of how this presentation, how this, this article, this chapter comes in the book that I'm editing in celebration of Dr. Bilolo. So it is because of this as well that I made the argument that we really need a different field of study, right? And I call this into Com, and Com being the Kim in Kemet, and into being the same root as Bantu. That the word into itself means object, thing, people, but you can say Muntu as a singular human being, Bantu the people, Kintu for things, Bintu for things as well. And there's many ways in which you can apply it. But what we're in development of is a field of study, a research field of study called Into Com, which is the Afrocentric Africologist study of Chikulu Chikam, which is just ancient Egypt within its greater Into context, right? And we don't have time to go into the details of that. Just know that in the greater context of the conversation that we're going to have now, right? So it is when we start looking at like the languages tells us something in terms of the greater relationship and the deep psychology, the deep worldview of not only the ancient Egyptians, but African people in general. And so our methodology includes historical comparative linguistics, because through the analysis of systematic, regular, non-accidental sound meaning correspondences between vocabulary and grammatical features and morphology, we are able to tie certain West and Central African cultures to ancient Egypt in a very deep historical context, for which we can prove that certain ideas and practices were inherited from the mother culture, which we call Chiena Intu. And Chiena Intu just means the Intu family, right? And so thus, Intu Kam, the Afrocentric study of Kemet or Chikam within this greater Intu context. And so I leave this here, people can come back and pause and see the sound meaning correspondences between the particular languages. But in ancient Kemet, to our knowledge, the hieroglyphic script did not write out the vowels. What the hieroglyphs that you see represent consonants and certain consonants in sequence. So if it's a singular consonant, it is a monoliteral. If it's two consonants in sequence for a singular hieroglyph, it is a biliteral consonant, hieroglyph. If it is three consonants in sequence and it is represented by a single hieroglyph, then we call that a triliteral hieroglyphic symbol. And so because of that, when you're writing the script down, there are a whole bunch of words that have nothing to do with each other, but have the same root consonants in sequence. And some of those words may have actually been pronounced the same or similarly to other words. So if they are the same pronunciation, we call them homonyms, just like there and there in English. So over there is one word that has a different meaning that is dealing with location in, respect to the speaker, right? Versus here, and then there's there, the plural possessive, third party plural possessive, like it's their car, it is their language, it is their, whatever. So in our current iteration of the English language, there and there sounds exactly alike, but they're spelled different. But if you was just to drop the vowels, the consonants would look the same. Just like with hat, hut, hit, hot, right? The consonants are the same, but the vowels are different and indicate different words. And you'll see that in the ancient Egyptian language. But words that sound the same, and this just isn't an African thing. This is just a human thing across the world. Mm-hmm. The ancient human ancestors, when words sounded alike, they believed that those words that sounded alike were connected in some way. Mm. And oftentimes they would create mythologies or culture centered around those words sounding alike. So a good example is in Ancient Kemet. There's a story about the god Ra creating human beings from his tears. Mm. Well, what's the inspiration for that? Because the word human beings, remech, sounds similar to the word for tears in the language, remiyet. So they thought that those words sounded similarly enough that they must be connected. and they created a narrative that human beings came from the tears of Ra.
Mhm.
The Greeks did the same thing, but they had a word laoi that meant human beings, but there was another word leaoi that meant stones. So they created a totally different myth that human beings came from stones.
Hmm.
Right? It's just a human phenomenon. They didn't have historical comparative linguistics back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? That's not a field of study.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we were looking as human beings for synthesis and a reason to synthesize ideas. And it is that synthesis as a result of paronymy, a word linked to another by similarity of form, that we get much of the creative motifs, including the association of the leopard skin with the spiritual double, and the leopard skin with kings and queens, because the words sounded alike in another day. Excuse me, in another time. So this is in the original presentation. So I'm dealing with the word that we colloquially pronounce the ba. So I'm not sure if you are familiar with the ancient Egyptian people of the person, like the Ren, the Ka, the Ra, the Ren. I said that already. The Ba and the Shu, which is the shadow. They're believed to be aspects of the human being that that interact with each other in some context of a person's life. And so that is represented in the first row with these glyphs. These are individual glyphs with all the same pronunciation of Ba. And the reason why we say Ba is because when we transliterate the hieroglyphs, this sound that I have bolded in red, we transliterate that on the computer with a capital A. So that's why people say Ba, but it's not Ba. It is more closer to Beri or Biro.
Hmm.
It's an R sound. It's two. So these are a representation of biliterals, biliteral hieroglyphs. So this one glyph, even though I have three representations here at the top, is simply two consonants in sequence. The bir, you know, we don't know exactly how it was pronounced, but it was definitely a bir sound, right? And so that spiritual essence, but it has the same pronunciation as the word for leopard, which is at the bottom here in cheetah. And at one time I argue, and I'll be discussing that when we get to DC this weekend, that the word for king, bit, in terms of like Nesubiti,
Yeah.
the name for the king, this was actually pronounced biri as well. But this went through a linguistic phenomenon where the R sound was palatalized into a Y or E, right? And so, but we won't get into the king or the leopard today. So we're just going to deal with this concept of the spiritual essence. And so we're going to go to the Kikongo language. Now, I got to say that the word for spirit or soul in many African languages, and I give plenty of examples in the actual article, derives from words for either lungs, heart, or liver, right? And breath being a byproduct of the lungs,
Hmm.
right? Or you know, we know it's not a byproduct, but being in association with the lungs. So in some languages, the word for spirit or soul will be the same word for breath. In others, it will be heart. In others, it will be liver and or lungs. And so this is important. So in this instance here, we are looking at the word for heart in the ancient Egyptian language, which is represented by ib, right? And for those who use the German transliteration, we use the J instead of I in our translation system. So, but what I discovered is that this word for heart is missing the second consonant in its root. So there's a phenomenon in languages called stress, and we can tell, without getting too detailed, we can tell that the stress was on the root syllable of ancient Egyptian words. And when certain prefixes were added to the root, the stress moved to that first now, which is the first syllable, and the root of it becomes unstressed. When that happens, the unstressed syllable often falls off, especially if the second consonant was a liquid, and a liquid is your R's and L's, right? So that's why by the time it comes down in ancient Egyptian history, it is yib for heart instead of yibir for heart. Now, without the prefix, it still remains as the word bir for soul, but also bir for ram. And this is going to be important. And so we can prove, this is how Intucom and historical comparative linguistics proves relationships between African cultures and the like. So when you look at the Kikongo, I'm not sure how much you can really see here. So what I did was just, because I always have to have a whole bunch of examples, just in case someone wants to challenge and think that I'm just making up stuff and there's no patterns and I'm just cherry picking stuff. Like, no, we look at patterns, right? So I just took the first 4 rows from that and made it bigger. So hopefully y'all can see a bit better. So you can see the word for heart in the second row is Mbundu in Kikongo, right? And it's the same thing for kid and goat. So Bundu, spot of sheep or goat. And it's a partial reduplication in the word Babulu. And I should say that in Bantu languages, when the L sound, L is in Larry, as in lot, as in, light bulb, right? When it is nasalized, like an N sound is in front of it, the L becomes a D, as in Derek, as in dope, as in dark skin woman, right? So that's what you see here with this Bondu. But the original phoneme is L, just like in this Bubulu animal. And so what I discuss in the text is that really these are, it's a general word. The word bir for ram and Barbary sheep is really in the word for goat, right? These are words for general animals that are edible and domesticatable and usually has horns. And so that category becomes bir, right? But it's bundu in Kikongo. And the word, yibet in Egyptian or chikam, chibundu in community church in ancient Egyptian. And then this word, ib, to hide, to conceal, becomes imfundu, secret, right? And so these are the kinds of things, and in this instance, and I have other examples where the B sound in Egyptian corresponds to the F sound as in Fred, as in Frank, as in further along in the Kikongo languages. So certain sounds can change depending upon the environment that it exists in. And so what more than likely is the case is that there was a devoicing of the B sound into P as in Paul, and then the nasal prefix in Mfundu did what we call, strengthened, gave it a voicing characteristic. So now it's instead of, right, Mfundu. And so this becomes very important because part of the project is how do you accurately pronunciate ancient Egyptian words and hieroglyphs. That is an ongoing project. Many different schools of thought, people trying to figure out how did the ancient Egyptian language sound. And although, in my personal opinion, we may never figure that out, you can still have some kind of guess into plausible ways to pronounce it based upon how it is pronounced in other related languages. So, we know the full pronunciation of the word for heart would have been something like Yibiri, Yibiru, right? Or Yibiru, or Yiburu, something like that. If we look at Kikongo, and in the paper, I have a whole bunch of other examples. I just simplified it as not to spook the audience out with too much information.
Yeah.
Right? So this should be easy to handle. And the consonants that we are comparing, I have bolded in blue, right? For you to see. So when you come back and you screenshot this, you'll be able to see the sound meaning correspondences. And so the hieroglyphs that you see on the left-hand side, just like the hieroglyphs, here that they all have the biri sound. So you can write the word for soul not only with the bird with the head, the human head hieroglyph, you can write it with these two bird glyphs and the ram glyph, as well as this pot glyph. So this tells us something, that all of these had to be pronounced the same in order for you to be able to use these hieroglyphs to represent the concept of the soul. But it also tells us that not only that the hieroglyphs, which they represent, like for instance, this duck, in Kikongo, the word for a small duck is bunda. Just like how we see in these other examples of Mbundu, Mbunda, Bundu, Mfundu. Just like how all these sound similarly, the same thing with these hieroglyphs. And this is not accidental. So this is one of those instances where, it's a more sophisticated way, but there's a connection here that you can't dismiss.
Yeah.
Right. And we got more examples. So this lets us know that the ba and the ram, were similar in pronunciation, and it is because of paronymy that those two things were brought together. The same thing with the bird, which is why the human head has the bird body. Because it's telling you that all this was pronounced the same, and that we can use this as a rebus to represent the concept of the soul. So it's just like if I wanted to say, I believe in English. Now, of course, I can spell that, the letter I, and then believe is BELIEVE, right? I believe. But I can also put a graphic representation with an actual eyeball, a picture of a bee, and then a picture probably of like a leaf.
Yeah.
Right. So if I put those hieroglyphs in sequence, you should still be able to read in English, I believe, or I believe, but still get it to be like I believe. So that's exactly what's happening here. So even in these other languages, for example, in the Ewe language, the same word for spirit Bogbo, has a similar pronunciation as the word for goat, bo. And it's the same thing in ancient Egyptian for the ram and the goat, just like what we've seen here, right? So we have the biri, soul, and soul and ram, and the same thing with kid, goat, Barbary, sheep, ram. They're all in the same domesticated animal category, right? And in the Sesotho language, pelo, heart, and remember that the word for spirit and soul is the same as the word for heart, lungs, liver, and sometimes breath, right? And then you had a word for goat, podi. And so in this instance, the L sound, when it's followed by an I in Bantu languages, the L becomes D. So the L becomes D when prefixed by N, and the L becomes D when suffixed by I, right? So that changes how we pronunciate, and then there's vowel metathesis in this particular instance. But we can see that even in Ewe and Sesotho, if we had hieroglyphs in those languages, they can use the word for goat or a hieroglyph of goat to write the word for spirit. They'll just have to write the word for goat twice, right? To get the word for spirit, bog bog, bog bog, right? And a similar thing with the Sesotho language. And so in the I did some other linguistic work, which is in the text, and come to find that in the Zerma language, so we heard of the Songhai Empire or Songhai Empire in Mali, right? Their word for the soul, which is cognate, and we did the list, the same thing that we did earlier with Chiluba and Yoruba. With Zerma is they pronounce it biye or bio. So instead of saying the ba, like we do in Egyptology speak, because we don't know how to pronounce it, we can substitute that with biye or bio, because that's how that same word, that same concept is pronounced among the Zerma speakers or the Songoi speakers in Mali, West Africa, right? And so, for example, we have the author, and he's also a prince of royal lineage from Timbuktu. This is Dr. Hasimi Omaro Maega, right? And he wrote a text called Balancing Written History with Oral Tradition. And in this, it is talking about the Songhai people, how they came together from different groups of people and created an empire and a culture and a spirituality, right? Very good book. I highly recommend everybody get it. And so he starts talking about the concept of the bio. So I'll just read this here. He says, besides the Hund, I don't know how you pronounce it. I don't know if it's Hund or Hunde. Somebody of the Zerma language and Songhai language, please help correct me. Besides that term, there is the bio, the double, which is the reflection of or the shadow of the living soul. The double was not attached to the body. On the contrary, the double remains separate from the body, but is always nearby. A person who is separated from his or her bio, his ba, becomes ill until the bio returns. For example, the Songhai explain dreams, possessions, and even clairvoyance through the bio, which actually is the one who has the experiences. The dream, for example, is just a reflection of what the bio has experienced while the person was sleeping. Some magic practices consist of replacing the bio with something else other than one's own double. So remember, the double is also the leopard for Bilolo. It is his self, right? After death, the BO remains beside the deceased and goes tormented to the other world unless the descendants of the deceased person give the double another place in which to reside. On the other hand, in the case of brutal or accidental death, the BO, the double, still lives, wanders, and takes revenge upon the living. And I'll stop right there. But this gives us some clarity on the Ba concept and how it is used in other places in Africa. And so part of the methodology would be to explore. So the first step would be to do the linguistic work so that we find the exact cognates of these phenomena in ancient Egypt, whether we're talking about Ma'at, the god of moon, the Ankh, whatever. We do a historical comparative analysis, and then we see what the word is in these other African languages, and then we study how those people utilize that in the culture. And then we come back to ancient Egypt and start comparing what is written about the Ba and then what is written about the Bo. And if there are similarities, and what are the differences in how they're expressed in these different regions. And then we come back after looking at the Ba in various different African cultures and seeing what are all the similarities. Then we can come to make a conclusion that based upon the written evidence and external African external Egyptian inner African evidence, that the Ba should be interpreted this way. And these are the aspects that were inherited from the proto language and culture that manifests itself in these different African languages and cultures, including the ancient Egyptian. And now we have an African-centered way of interpreting the phenomena and can get away from the Egyptology speak because they aren't grounded in the cultures itself to be able to interpret the phenomenon. And here's just a picture of the Ba in the tomb coming back in the tomb. But the Ba is not only, it doesn't only come after death, it's living. So there's a whole story, a man having a conversation with his Ba. So the man is still living. So it couldn't have been a phenomenon that just emerges after death if a man is sitting there complaining to his Ba. He's complaining to his double, to himself. In the Yoruba tradition, we would say we were having a conversation with our Ori. Our Ori is, most won't interpret it that way, but I have my reasons for interpreting this way. Your Ori is your double. It just happened to, by way of paronymy, there's a word Ori that means head. And so Yoruba people now interpret the Ori, which is a word for spirit and soul in the related languages, to the word Ori, which means head in the Yoruba language. So now when you talk about your Ori, it's your head, or your Ori Inu, which is located in the belly. That's a different conversation for a different day. But paronymy is the order of the day. This is how a lot of this phenomena came, because the word for bird, the word for wings, the word for spots, the word for head in human being were all pronounced biri or biri at some point in history. So they were able to make these iconic figures and iconographic figures and concepts simply based on a misunderstanding of language, right? And so that would generally end the presentation. But I have other slides so I'll pause here, and if we have time to go through other slides. You're on mute.
Appreciate that, brother. People like, subscribe, share. This is a deep conversation. speaking of deep conversation, my first question I have is how is there a way to simplify this, where where people are really grasping onto it, in sort of a layman's terms kind of thing?
All righty. The only way that I can simplify it and summarize it is simply this: that African people were inspired by the similarities in the pronunciation of words.
Mm-hmm.
When those ancient creatives started analyzing their language, they started creating mythologies and iconographies based upon the similarity of words. And in this instance, for example, if you can please share my screen again. Right. So here's an example from the Doluo language.
Mm-hmm.
The word for king or chief or president is Ruoth. That's their word. It's cognate with the word Orisha in the Yoruba language. And Ras in Semitic, and like Ras Tafari, like King Tafari, right? But there's also another word, Ruoth, meaning respectful, a well-behaved, upright, generous person, man or woman, or a compliment. So how do you think that the Luo people connected these two words? How did it manifest in the culture of the Luo people?
I'm not sure.
The king had to be a person who was respectful, well-behaved, upright, generous person.
Oh yeah, okay.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So these are two separate words, but they're synchronized together to create a phenomena called a king. So there's a king already, the chief, the leader, because this Ruoth comes from an ancient word that means head.
Mm-hmm.
But they lost the meaning of head. But we use the word head for like the head of household, the leader, the chief.
Yes.
But they replaced the old word for head with some other word that's in the language now. But this word Ruoth, the semantics for leader and chief still remain.
Gotcha.
Just not the word for head. So now when you speak of a king, you're speaking of someone who is an upright person. So that's the expectation of a king. Somebody who is respectful, a well-behaved, upright, generous person. Someone who's a compliment to the people. And this is what you're seeing in terms of this is verbal and conceptual. In ancient Egypt, there's a word ma'at. That means truth, justice, balance, order, reciprocity. But there's another ma that means wings. And there's another ma that means duck head. And there's another ma that means base or platform.
And these are in different languages?
This is in ancient Egyptian language, the same language.
So you're saying ma'at is in ancient Egyptian language several times.
Exactly. Like there is no one ma or mat. Mat is the nominal, ma is the verb form. There's no one mat. There's several different words. There's a mat that means water. There's a mat that means hair, right? Or eyebrow.
Yeah.
Right? These are all different words, but how the ancient Egyptians synchronized it in terms of the goddess Ma'at, because the word Ma itself, the verb form, it doesn't have the feminine T suffix. So when you add the feminine T suffix,
Gotcha.
they personified it as a woman, a female. So that's number one. Then there's a ma that means wings or bird, and also wind. So
And that's
you'll see
without
depiction.
the T.
I'm sorry?
And that's without the T.
Yes. So that's without the T suffix.
Gotcha.
So now what they did was they put the feathers, because there's a ma'at meaning feather, like the feather of ma'at.
Yeah.
So you'll see ma'at with her arms stretched out like this with feathers on her. And she's like in a sitting, kneeling position on a platform that is also ma. They all have different meanings, but the ancient Egyptians synchronized them and created this phenomenon called the goddess Ma'at. Right? And you know, stuff like that is done all throughout the continent. And I think with these slides, these are just kind of linking. So like I was reading this book, it's called The Savage Sudan. It's Wild Tribes, Big Game, and Bird Life by Abel Chapman. And you know, it's a product of its day. I will say that, right? The language that is used, calling, you know, because it's a book about the recordings of animals along the Nile River in the Sudan. So it's just discussions about birds, hippos, alligators, stuff like that. But he also calls, so when he says savage Sudan, it's the savage animals. But he also calls the Africans the savages, like the Shilluk and Nuer tribes, right? And so all throughout the text, he had some photos, but the vast majority of the images are what he drew based upon what he saw. So if he saw a bird landing in a certain way, he drew it. If he saw alligators or hippos or flamingos and stuff like that, that's what he drew. So what you see here is from page 199, he's drawing what he saw as a Shilluk chief. It's a Nubian chief, right? The Shilluk are related to the Nuer, the Dinka people. They're all part of that Nilotic nomadic pastoralist group. But you see this Kofer, this unique kind of object on the top of the head. And this looks like the white crown of Ancient Kemet, just a bit more tilted, right? And what we discover from the text is that it's a coiffures is just hairstyles. That's what the word coiffures mean. And so he's describing, you know, the Shilluk, calling them tall, lean, and muscular, and between 6 and 7 feet in stature. These are the people who, along with some others who in the Bible they call giants in Ethiopia. You know, there's these folks, right? Stark naked and some smeared in red and others in yellow and ghastly ash gray ochre, almost white, and with odd clay cemented coiffures. And so this got me to thinking about the inspiration for the hieroglyph of the crown of Upper Egypt, and why you don't find one anywhere. Because, you know, by the time you get into ancient Egyptian civilization, is really kind of symbolic on the walls, but in real life, it was just some clay, some white clay that was put, you know, on top of the head to make it that unique shape, right? And we see that same kind of style in terms of the headpiece when we go to West Africa in Benin. And so this is a carving. This is not a carving, but a copper alloy bust of a queen mother from the 16th century AD, Kingdom of Benin. And so we see the same type of hairstyle. I mean, or same type of object representation in in this, you know, creative motif here, right? As we see with the Dinka, excuse me, with the Shilluk chief in there. And so even I can't go through the linguistics right now,
Yeah.
but the word Ade, the word for crown in the Yoruba language, is the same word for Hedjit, crown of Upper Egypt. They call it the white crown. There's a word hedge that means white, and then, you know, this word Hedjit here is the crown of Upper Egypt, but it's not. It doesn't necessarily, as the linguistics prove, necessarily mean white crown.
Yeah.
It's just two separate words. They just kind of happen to go together. Happen to be white, and there's just a word for crown itself, Hedjit. And by regular sound meaning correspondences, we can demonstrate this. But even still, the crown in of Yoruba land looks just like the crown in ancient Kemet.
Yeah.
And even while, so if you look on the far right, you see the white crown kind of with a different style top, and it has the feathers on the side along with the ram. And so the Yoruba took it up a notch and just put the whole bird on the crown and not just the feathers.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're going to see some differences, but still the same fundamental spirit attached. And so this is not surprising. There's other evidence. When I talked about earlier, that evidence of the migrations of people coming out of Sudan and ancient Egypt into West Africa, like even earlier scholars had suspected this even without the full body of evidence. And so like in this text here, which is Lectures on Nigerian Prehistory and Archaeology, on page 48, this was published in 1969, it says, it does seem that at least in part, the Yoruba did have some sort of Sudanic origin and were not originally all forest zone dwellers. Thus, the modern Yoruba are very likely a composite product resulting from the intermixing of people already in the forest with others emanating from the Sudanic zone. So it's just like what we saw among the Songhai people, right? There's different groups coming together and they create a new society, but with each bringing cultural elements that become intertwined and become the new thing. That's what happened with the Yoruba. That's what happened with the ancient Egyptians, and why they are why they correlate so well with certain other individual tribes, because those individual tribes is who migrated and became the ancient Egyptians.
Yes.
Right. And so we see stuff like this, for example, right? This is and shout out to Sister Deidre McIntyre on Facebook. She's in the fight, you know, for the Africanness of ancient Kemet and the like. And so this is a chief from the Lega people in the Congo. And he has the same hair makeup as what you see drawn in this ancient Egyptian motif. So you see the hair stranded, you see the bald head at the top, and even you see the colors. I mean the necklace with the stripes going down. You see that over here on the left, right? But this is why we have Intu-Kam, because when the museum discusses this artifact, it says a man with alopecia was a reality. Alopecia was a reality in ancient Egypt. The Oshikon of a man with alopecia, Petri Museum.
Yeah.
So he got a disease of the head.
Yeah.
Not understanding this is African culture, that they're these African people with braids, wigs.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is the a similar thing from the Bwami. It's a society called Bwami, right? And this is the particular wig, and that's what you see in the depiction. So here's wigs from Ancient Kemet, from the 21st dynasty.
Yeah.
What kind of hair are they depicting?
Yep.
Right. So African people, even though they'll shave their head bald, they wanted the wigs to look like their natural hair.
Yes.
So that's why when you go to Egypt, this is the natural hair. This is why it looks this way. They didn't try to imitate some stringy European or Middle Eastern, Mediterranean type hair. They just cut off their head and then replaced it with their own hair in a twist or some other kind of material to look like their own hair. And so if you don't have these examples in your repertoire, you'll be making silly arguments that have alopecia, or alopecia, right? And so when you look at Tutankhamun's mask, you see this long tail in the back. There's people walking around Africa like this today with the same hairstyle. This is Nilotic. This is this is the Nandi people, related to the collagen people in Kenya and parts of Ethiopia and southern Sudan. Right? But it's also amongst the Maasai as well, that you'll see this particular hairstyle. So this is what they're imitating when they see this. This isn't just a head cloth.
Yeah. This
is an actual hairstyle, and you can see the braids as imitated. This is artistic style of this. These are the royal iconography, the royal motifs coming from inner Africa.
Yeah.
Right? These Nandi and Maasai people didn't, look at some ancient Egyptian artifacts in the museum and it's like, hey, let's try to imitate that with our hairstyle.
Yeah.
It's the other way around. Right? So even in this one, this isn't, at least with the artifact, and I haven't come across one arguing that this is a disease or anything. But again, if you don't know Africa, you don't know what's going on in this picture here, because they don't know about the Gadda society amongst the Oromo people that is now living in Ethiopia, right? And you can see the hairstyle, like it's a patch of clay and things that they put in the center of the hair. So this isn't a bald head at the top on the right hand with what you see in Kemet. This is clay. And as you can see, it matches the skin tone.
Yes.
As you can see, these Oromo, it's a particular society. It's an age grade system. So these folks are going through initiation. So this is telling you that this is a young man going through initiation. But you won't know that if you're looking to the Middle East, trying to explain ancient Egyptian African phenomena. Yeah. Right? So this is just another angle. So this brother's working the field. And so, but you can tell this is an Oromo person, and that's the skin color of the Oromo people. Almost an exact match. At least with this little brother right here, this left hand corner. This one a little darker over on the far left hand corner. Right? And so, how are you going to explain the hairstyles? Because ain't nobody in the Middle East, in the Levant, in Arabia with these hairstyles. Ain't nobody in Greece. Ain't no Berbers with this hairstyle. Ain't no Italians.
Nope.
Nobody. But you can only find this in Africa, in Sudan, Ethiopia, amongst the Afar folks and the like. They're telling you who they are with the monuments, because the Dinka folks have distinct markers. And so this is coming from the 25th dynasty, pharaoh on the left-hand side, but he has the Dinka marker. So we know he was Dinka. because these markings, these hairstyles, these jewelry patterns,
Yeah.
they identify a people, they identify a culture. I can tell where the people are from in the ancient Egypt based upon their hairstyles, the jewelry that they're wearing, the scars, the scarification that you can see on the motifs and the like. Right? We know who the warriors are. You know, the ancient Egyptian body type on the statues is an African body type.
Yep.
When you go look at the pharaohs and Ramesses and all these other people, and you see these statues of these tall, slender, because these are African body types. They weren't trying to imitate people in the Middle East. They were trying to imitate those brothers in the Sudan, because they were those brothers from the Sudan.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that, right? And this is another example of from the Maasai example. So this is Maasai, but you see the same thing.
Yep.
Because this is a Nilotic hairstyle that you see, and this is Tutankhamun's Ka statue, right? And then an Afar herder, right? Similar hairstyles and skin tone, right? When you see in the ancient Egyptian reliefs on the top, them braiding, like this is the exact process, same instruments to make the twist and the curls.
Wow. 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 Wow.
When you see the butter or the fats on the top of the heads of the ancient Egyptians,
Yeah.
right? Like in Ethiopia, they're still doing these things. This is why we need an into com, so we can stop arguing with white folks in Egyptology who don't know how to answer these motif questions.
Yeah.
And don't know what to call it, and wonder, why don't understand the inheritance of these cultural expressions here, right? Because you can't, because imagine putting this on European type hair.
Yeah. Nah. Not happening.
It's not happening, right?
Yes.
You're not doing. I'm gonna skip a second, and I'm gonna come back. Oh, I didn't add it. Thought I did. No, I did not. Did I skip it? Didn't add it. Shame on me. But I have another one where you can see the white, like there's ancient Egyptian motifs and drawings where the frozen things are white.
Mm-hmm.
But that is from the Afar people who put this kind of fat in the hair to make it white, and they let it sit there.
Yeah.
Right. So like the ancient Egyptians are documenting, everything. You see these hairstyles in these things in the reliefs, and these are people who's supposed to be from Libya in the ancient Egyptian relief. But this is what these Libyans look like.
Yeah.
Back in the day, not the Gaddafi kind that you see, there now, right? In Ethiopia, they still putting Ankh symbols on the forehead, right?
So when you show someone like a Eurocentric person, when you show them this, or an Arab person, an Arab scholar, and you show them all these photos and the continuity and the relationship and all of that from the research that you've done, what's the answer? What's the comeback that they have to this?
There is no comeback. It's denial. I wish, because like if I show them a few, they'll try to change the subject, move the goalposts,
Yeah,
and things of that nature, right? But I'm like, no, sit here. We got time. I got more, because you like I literally, like, I have whole presentations that I can do this all day and not repeat an image, right? What you want to do is overwhelm them and have them argue that it's a coincidence that all of these things match like this.
Yeah.
So, because usually I start the conversation, I set them up. How many chances do we get before it's no longer a coincidence?
Yeah.
How many, like how many times?
Yeah.
Right? Like, because, if I'm showing you 10, 20, 30, 40 examples, at this point, you can't say that these are chance coincidence. How many chances do I get before it's no longer a coincidence?
Yeah.
Like if you saw like some text messages from your girl, right? That from with another guy,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
may be, that's a chance. That I don't know. That's depending on the nature of the conversation. That may not be absolute proof.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? But then you see on her social media page her in the picture with a guy at a restaurant that is dated at a date that she said that she was going to be here at this time, and there's a video of them kissing on another thing, right? And a whole bunch, like all of this stuff. Like, how many chances before it's not chance is before it stops being coincidence? It's just a coincidence that you had this, and this, and this, right? And again, we can tell exactly where the people are from by the jewelry, by the hairstyles, by the complexions, because all of these things are, how should I say, a commitment to an ideal within that culture. These represent ideals in the culture. They're not wearing it for nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like today is just pretty. And I'm not saying that certain things aren't done just because of style.
Yeah.
But even if that was its initial thing, they'll then start adding meaning to it. Like a married person may only wear these colors in this sequence. If I wear something else, it means that I'm uninitiated. Or if I do this, I'm part of a metallurgy guild, right? Like everything means something. And it's not just like when we went back to to this, right? We know that this person is going through initiation, but he got to go work the fields in between, certain rites or whatnot.
Yeah.
Because this is what they do amongst the Oromo. They got to wear this, this patch of clay or whatnot, or, even if they do shave that spot off, they may totally cut it off at the end of the initiation. Like if you pledge, for those who pledged back in the day when pledging was legal in college, and they shaved your head right before you crossed. You know what I'm saying? Like it's those kind of things happening. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm involved in and what we do in terms of establishing the relationship between ancient Egypt and quote unquote sub-Saharan Africa, because that's what they try to use to separate.
So what's your goal? What's your goal when you're doing this comparative analysis? What's your goal, your long-term goal?
There's several long-term goals, right? One is to strengthen the arguments of Diop and to continue the work of Diop Obinga and the elders who were initially making those arguments, right? And so they made some hypotheses. Many they were able to establish, others they needed more evidence on. And we're at a period of time where we can bring their research further. So as a researcher, that's part of the process. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of this stuff is because I understand like folks love Ancient Kemet, and we want to start creating institutions and things built off of the ancient Egyptian blueprint. And there are many people calling themselves priests and scribes and all this other kind of stuff that aren't directly connected to Egypt or the Sudan itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so this allows me to say, hey, you don't have to skip all the way to Egypt for this information, for these motifs and icons and rituals and things. They exist intact right in these various places in Africa that you can go visit and become initiated into, which will enhance your studies of ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
So when people are making these arguments again that you aren't connected to ancient Egypt, let's just say you're right. But
Mm-hmm.
the ancient Egyptians are using our terms, the BO, the BA,
Mm-hmm.
for the and for Ma'at it's Nungu amongst the Bakongo. They're worshiping our gods in Yame, in Yangmine, in places like Ghana, Mali. They're worshiping, like they're calling the rivers the same. They're worshiping the deeds. When you say nectar, in Ghana it's in Toro. In among the Sango people it's Toro.
And it means the same thing?
The same thing. And by regular sound meaning correspondences, we can prove that they are the same word. It's not just look alike. So that's why we have the various examples, so that we can eliminate the lookalikes. That we're showing a pattern of the same sounds and sequence in those languages, even if they're pronounced differently, because we expect that between languages that descend from a common mother culture and language. So what happens is dialects form and the descendants move further and further apart, and the dialects are no longer intelligible to the groups. And now so much time has passed that they don't even know that they're related.
Yeah.
Right. So the only way that we can retrace our steps in history is to do a comparative analysis. So if we have a group of languages over here and a group of languages over here, we study the language, we write down all the words, we transcribe them similarly, so that we're making sure that we're matching, or we're understanding the exact sounds in the language. We document the morphology of the language, and then we start comparing. What do you call water? What do you call water? What do you call son? What do you call son? What do you call father? What do you call father? What do you call child? And it goes on and on. And when we have a large enough list, then we're able to see the patterns and discover the sound laws and things. And so that is an undeniable way to show or demonstrate relationship between two or more languages and people. And so now when I'm having these conversations with people who are Kemetic enthusiasts, it's like, you need to check this out over here amongst the Akan and the Ghanaians, right? It's the same thing, and it's the same word. This is how they pronounce it. And so, because what ends up happening is people start getting mythical and magical and just start making up stuff and associating with the ancient Egyptians. I ain't reading the text, don't know his African historical context, and this is what we want to avoid. So now, taking the lead from Diop, let's have a scientific, systematic, detailed way of demonstrating these relationships and showing that the concrete evidence of the same phenomenon in these things, in these different cultures across Africa. And if you want to build a system based on Egypt, you have a better understanding of more likely how it is, and you have now an Africological lens for which to interpret, because most of the information that they're going to get is coming from Egyptology. And which brings about the third mission, is the re-Africanizing of ancient Egypt and ancient Kemet, so that we get a better and more fuller and more richer understanding, because our study of ancient Egypt in Meroitic society is built on an African foundation, and is based on our understanding of African languages, African cultures and rituals, African psychology, African religions. And we're able to look at that as as Dr. Muba Binge Balolo did, and say, when we as chiefs, as princes, as priests in our community see the leopard, this is just a representation of myself, my double, my shadow,
Yeah.
right? My power. And what I didn't go into here is that the spots represent the king's and or the priest's ability to maneuver between two worlds: the dark world, the ancestral unknown world, and the light world, the patterns of light and dark. And so the light representing the eternal world, the everyday world that we can see, right? And so these are there's many different reasons, and it just depends on the research project in terms of what is the ultimate goal. And so ultimately, no matter what, is always going to be for clarity and understanding, because I'm just interested in the subject. But now I'm also looking at ways in which to enhance our current conditions. So, for example, I didn't put it in the in this presentation, but I'll just read it because I'm dealing more so with kingship. And I talk about what, I ask the question, what does it mean to be king, right? And based upon my research, I've come to understand kingship in this way. And so let me pull it up. So I'm just going to read. I'm not going to show it. Right. So, and this is based upon other studies, a decades-long study. So this isn't just from the article which sparked the presentation, right? I already have a book that came out in 2016 called Nesubiti. And so it's dealing with kingship, leadership, and paronymy, right? So as I break down, what an African king is. And so the first thing that I say is that the African king is the central pillar of a house for which people and institutions can lean on and not fall. And that is based on words for king being equated with words for pillar, staff, things that hold up, walls. Like that's the literal word for that we interpret in English as king. He is the central pillar for which people can lean on and not fall. So it means he is consistent, in that he holds systems in place, right? One who has double sight is what I mentioned earlier. He can see in the diurnal and the nocturnal worlds, which the Africans have represented as speckled or spotted. So that's why you see the motifs associated with a cheetah, a leopard, even the bobird. As you saw with the bobird, you saw all spots on it, right? So an African king, he is the husband, he is the father of the nation, the community, and the household, right? An African king is polygamous, right? He has at least two wives. One, he's married to the land, and two, he has a human wife. Now, in other instances, there's more than one human wife, but at minimum, he has two wives, because he has to have a relationship with the land and to be able to produce from the land before he can get the woman to help, in that process and secure for the future. But you first have to be married to the land, the resources. This is where the HAPI economics comes into play, right? An African king is an organizer and a creator of systems. And this is especially needed in today's time. It's not enough to have a position. You have to know how systems work. And so when you see problems, you have a systematic approach to the solving of those problems. And lastly, an African king is one who opens the canals and makes the rivers to gurgle and buzz and rise and flood. Now that's
Mhm.
part of what I'm going to be discussing in DC. And
Okay.
so we're dealing with Nesubiti and the symbol of the bee, right? Because the king was a rainmaker. But in ancient Egypt, it didn't rain. In modern Egypt, it doesn't rain. They depended on the flooding of the Nile. And when the floods waters are coming in strong, it sounds like a bunch of bees buzzing. Sounds like
Mhm.
a swarm or a gurgling sound. So the king is the one who opens the canals and brings forth the water. Because remember, a king has to have a relationship. He has his first wife is with the land.
Yeah.
He has to be a producer of something. He has to bring in prosperity. And
Mhm.
so in a desert place, of course, in any place where there's life, you need water. And if you're able to have all of these characteristics and things, there are some other canals when you have the second wife that, would inspire some inundation and flooding, and you can produce in other ways. And that's part of the equation of what it means to be king too, in terms of satisfying, and making those things to happen in your home as well. And so uh these are the things. So it's getting the details right so I can find practical ways to utilize that information in modern times.
Mhm.
And so stuff like this will be good for a young men's rites of passage. You ask, what does it mean to be king? And you develop systems and processes to develop those characteristics so
Yeah.
that in their household, at least, they become the pillar
Yeah.
that the people can lean on and not fall. It means you have to be stable. You have to be strong. You have to be a defender of the home. And there's just certain things as men that we are expected to do and be. And no matter how much talk of dismantling the patriarchy and the like, there's just women are looking for men. And
Mhm.
it's just certain things that men do and that men are that is not going to change no matter what. And those are those, and if you have those characteristics alongside, empathy, emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
being able to communicate effectively, right? That's part of being a king, is knowing how to communicate and inspire,
Yeah.
right? To be wise, to be constantly learning in things. These are the lessons that the ancient Egyptians are teaching us.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, so for example, I'm gonna go back some, right? And I didn't go to this slide, but I'm gonna go there now, right? So here's a text, the second Simna Stela of Sesostris III. This is the king speaking, or this is about the king.
Mhm.
And then he starts speaking. His Majesty established the southern border at Hay. Establish my border further south than my forefathers. So he's telling you here that I'm expanding what my ancestors did. I'm not complacent with their achievements. I'm going to push it forward. I'm going to push it and expand the boundaries. So that's one characteristic of a king.
Mhm.
It's about expanding. It's about flourishing, making things to flourish. He says, I added to what has bequeathed to me, meaning what I inherited. I added to it. I just wasn't satisfied with what they give me. I am a king who speaks and acts as a man. You are to say what you mean what you say, and act and do what you say you're going to do.
Mhm.
That's what it means. That's part of what it means to be king.
Yeah.
And that's what women are looking for in a man. You said you was about this. You said this and this. And they will test you consciously and unconsciously to see if you're going to be a man of your word. Or
Yeah.
you're going to be disciplined and consistent in how you move. Right? I make happen what I conceive. That means he has to be a visionary.
Yeah.
So I have a vision of something and I execute and I make happen what I conceive in my mind.
Mhm.
Eager to seize, hasty to succeed, in whose heart a matter does not slumber. I don't wait too long. It's go time, right? Anticipating inferiors, suppressing mercy, merciless to the enemy who attacks him, who attacks one who would attack, but who is silent when one is silent. In other words, don't start none, won't be none.
Yeah.
You know, if you want the smoke, I'm strong enough. I'm you know, I'm swift enough in my defenses. I know how to defend my family and myself. I can bring the ruckus if I need to. But if you ain't doing anything to me, I'm not doing anything to you.
Yeah.
This is ma'at
Yeah.
in the process here.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're reading the ancient Egyptian text, it's giving you the blueprint on manhood, at least in this instance here, on manhood.
Yeah.
Through the example of kingship. And these are the kind of characteristics. I don't think anybody's going to argue with this. You know, this doesn't seem like toxic masculinity to me. If it does, you know, please let me know. Give me an example how any of this is toxic masculinity. This is what you want in your sons, in your husbands, in your fathers, right? So this is, and I can show you examples like this in other areas of Africa to show you that this just isn't an ancient Egyptian thing. This is all throughout Africa. And so it's just stuff like that. You know, there's many different reasons for why I do what I do and why this stuff is important. But I believe that, you know, I'll be 47 this summer, God willing, ancestors willing, right? I'm at that age now where, you know, there's generations below me, and they look at and listen to what I say and will be ready to repeat what I'm saying in their circles, or they'll try to utilize, you know, what I bring forth. So I'm obligated to be very detailed in my analysis so that I'm giving them good and vital information. So I consider myself, you know, almost at a general stage, right? Like a general puts together the plans for the war. He organizes the resources and sets the play in motion. If I give you misinformation, if a general has bad intel, he may send you out into battle and lead you right into an ambush.
Yes.
So at this stage, you got to be very caring and concerning about the information in which you share.
Yeah.
Right. And make sure that that when I give this to you, you'll be able to defend yourself in the world that's trying to attack, you know, Black African consciousness and our ability to discuss and write our own history.
So with everything that you've said, everything that you've taught us, do you feel that I'm just going to focus on Black Americans? I really use the word Black for now. Do you feel that Black Americans should all learn an African language, or?
Oh,
Definitely. And why is that?
Because it starts the process of your re-Africanization. Because you'll start thinking in an African way. You start using words, and there's different ways that, to a certain extent, which we're losing because you know, our rush to integrate with Europeans, we're starting to talk white, we're starting to think like white people, and we're losing the recipes, right? And so there's phenomena in linguistics called a semantics, for example. A semantics is the way that a culture and a population and linguistic group maps ideas to words. And so in West Africa, for example, if we defeated somebody, the words that they would use in their language, we would translate in English as to eat.
Mm.
We lost the words, but we kept the semantics.
Gotcha.
So if you and I are running on a track and I surpassed you with significant speed, when you get to the finish line, I'll be like, I ate your ass up on
Yeah.
that damn field.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the sisters, oh, sister ate. They start with the fingers and stuff. So-and-so ate.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not happenstance. That's a
Happenstance.
semantics that we kept, even though we replaced the word for to eat.
Got you.
Right? And so by learning African languages, you'll start to learn why you speak the way that you do, why you use the phrases and you approach language in the way that you do.
Yeah.
Because it still has that underlying African spirit in it.
Yeah.
But then also you'll be able to communicate with more people on the
Yes.
continent. You'll be able to do business on the continent because you speak the language. Right? And so there's many different reasons and ways, or many different reasons in which, you know, it is important to learn African languages. And I would encourage everybody to study an ancient language like the Meta Nature,
Mm-hmm.
and a modern language for which you could communicate with folks.
Yeah.
You know, if you want a more broader language like Kiswahili, you know, or you can learn Wolof or Akan, you know, or Yoruba language, right? Or isiZulu language, so you can start speaking with folks in South Africa.
So when
You know.
so by you learning different languages, well, I'll just talk about the Meta Nature. How?
And I'm sorry, you can stop sharing the screen too.
Oh, okay.
No problem.
So by you learning the Meta Nature, how have you been able to apply that to your life for the betterment of your spirituality and financially, if so?
In terms of financially,
I'm sorry. And the reason why I'm asking you this is because there are going to be people that are going to say, why do I need to even learn that? How is that going to benefit me now? And how is that going to benefit us as a people to ultimately move forward?
yeah, it's not going to be immediately apparent, because what studying the Meta Nature does is rewires your brain. So it helps me in programming, in software development, in mathematics, because, you know, you get to a point in mathematics and even software development and the like where you're not calculating numbers per se.
Yeah.
You're just using logic, and there's signs and symbols that represent concepts that you're really putting together, like in sentences. And so if you're used to that using the hieroglyphic script, it's not a jump for you to utilize to understand mathematics.
Yeah.
Right. And I've been working on that as something, you know, to teach using hieroglyphs to teach language and mathematics at the same time. Right. And how to approach it. That's what it is. That's what you see fundamentally. It's a code. When the ancient Egyptians are putting together spells, these are codes. That's exactly, it's just software on the walls. And so instead of a computer reading it, you know, a spirit or the person is reading it. And so when you're doing software development, you're just writing instructions for the computer to execute. And that's all an Egyptian spell is. You're just writing something for it to execute. Matter of fact, I did a presentation on the Egyptian origin of artificial intelligence. Right? We've been dealing with artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And so with artificial intelligence, you're talking about agents, software agents that do task on your behalf. without you having to be there and manually do the things.
Yeah.
So in ancient Egypt, for example, you have this concept called a shepti, and they would carve these little shepti dolls or whatnot that are supposed to represent agents for when the king or a high official dies. If the spirits on the other world want the king to do a task, he would delegate it to the sheptis, the artificial intelligence, and they would plow the fields, they would open the tombs, they would do whatever. This is the first instance of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Right? And so this is what I'm able to see and execute as a person who studies artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And understand what it actually is. So it's like, oh, this been here, at least conceptually. And then I can go to modern with the modern Yoruba folks, right? And they have this as well.
Yeah.
And so you get a better understanding, like all of this stuff. Like, so now if you are into coding and artificial intelligence, you may not have a big data center, but you can start creating stuff for your own home, right? You can start creating agents for your own home, build your own alarm system, build a key card system, for your locks and things, right? Like if you have an Airbnb or something like that, right? There's just many different things you can start coding and start doing certain things with 3D printing or communicating, creating radios and things, communicating, all because you are grounded in this type of thinking, and you can easily transfer and better understand it in its modern form on this little thing that we're calling the computer, right? So, yeah, if you have any more questions.
No, so let me ask you this, because I know you're a hip hop head.
Right.
Do you see a relationship with the Meta Necha script and hip hop?
In terms of, and this is something that I've been working on too. So I'm working on another book called Kimoyo. And Kimoyo is a term that I'm using to replace African spirituality, because it doesn't quite capture exactly what is going on.
You talking about the term?
I'm sorry?
You talking about the term African spirituality?
The term, yeah, the phrase African spirituality.
All right.
And so we can have a discussion on that another time. But part of the section that I'm dealing with in terms of language, so I've created this thing called jashe, which is the ashe of jazz, right? And I argue that hip hop culture, real hip hop, for me, real hip hop culture is an outgrowth of jazz. And so when you look at the early pioneering, all the records that they played are just really funk and jazz records, and funk is just another name for jazz. So like there's a whole history of us renaming stuff that it's just the same thing. So it's like, you say house music now, but it was disco in the 70s. So of course all music evolves in terms of its sound, but it's so like if you would call, even in the boom bap era, if you was to say that was hip hop in 1974, they would look at you and say like, what is that? Because all of the music that was being played was jazz and funk music for the most part. Right. So, but part of the hip hop culture is this use of language that we call jive. Yeah. And jive is an actual African word. It comes from like the Fulani Wolof speaking people, and it talks about this kind of exaggerated form of speech and wordplay. And all throughout the continent, you'll see the wordplay, like they would do syllables. They would switch the syllables, right? And they would do whole sentences and things with the syllables. The problem is that when we lost our languages, we did not inherit a language that you can do that with, like you can do with African languages. Yeah. But we still had the same semantics and spirit where we would do the wordplay, and we called it jive. And that's what you would see that comes up like there's literal rapping like what would happen in the 30s and the 20s, you know, like with the gospel singers and stuff like this. You know,
Yeah.
my name is that, and I say you to sit, you know, like the
Yeah.
real simple stuff. But like when you started getting into the 70s and the parties, they really start using the jive like you know, like what Muhammad Ali would do in
Yeah.
terms of his braggadocious, you
Yeah.
know, and then with rhyme, and you would just do that over the beats. It's the same phenomenon, but you'll see the same punning and wordplay in the meta nature in the same ways that you would see in West Africa in terms of jive. And they even have the word, because I did an etymological study on this,
Mhm.
and one good source for this and what I'm about to say is Africanisms in American Culture, edited by Joseph E. Holloway, right? Which I think was either the second edition was published either 1995 or 2005, one of those dates, right? And there's one chapter where it tells you about the etymology and the meaning of the word jazz, and you will see it in the ancient Egyptian language as well as haz, you know, and this is before the ha became palatalized and became yaz or jazz in
Mhm.
West Africa, right? And so it's talking about these different kind of music styles and the like, and but it's the jive in the punning and the wordplay, and that's all paronymy is in the Egyptological literature. It's the punning, the wordplay based on the similarity of the words, and you'll see that in
Mhm.
like when I gave the example of the remech, you know, coming from the remiet,
Yeah.
you know, of Ra. You know, the human being is coming from the tears of Ra, and you'll find all this kind of uh, wordplay in ancient Egypt. And so there's the notion, for example, of the many names,
Mhm.
right? Like we don't know what the real names of the folks are. They rename themselves, you know, after a particular characteristic. That's what the kings would do. They would have 5 names,
Yeah.
right? And the certain name that they would be known as may not be their actual birth name, but
Yeah.
it's representative. Like I am Ramesses II, Ursa
Yeah.
Ma'at Ra, Satep bin Ra, right?
Yeah.
Like that's in um the hieroglyphs in terms of this particular pattern. And in the text I show how even in the Congo, for example, you have birth names, you have names that people give you,
Mhm.
and then you are expected to name yourself in the same way. Like Karis One has a lecture at Temple University here in Philly where he's talking about that in terms of the evolution of hip hop. You know, you don't name yourself as an MC, you know, Harold Johnson, that's my birth name, right? You
Yeah.
know, I am DJ Star Ski, boom, 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 boom. You give a name that reflects who you think you are and who you want to be known as to the people.
Got it.
That's exactly in the Congo, and that's exactly in ancient Egypt as
Mm.
well. And so like this, it's the spirit of hip hop is really the spirit of jazz.
Yeah.
Is jazz. So there's jazz in ancient Egypt, there's jazz in West and Central Africa, and that jazz coming and culminating in Congo Square. There's 2 Congo Squares. There's Congo Square in New Orleans, and there's
Mhm.
Congo Square here in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
right? 2 centers of Congo culture, and even the word Congo is cognate with the word Kemet, and that's another discussion. But like it's all intertwined, and it just takes the right methodology, you know, reliable source material, and you'll be able to make those particular patterns and
Yeah.
see the historical Africanness of what we do, and especially in hip hop culture with graffiti, of course, and even to a certain extent, it's not too much moves that we can ascertain from the walls in terms of Egyptian dance, right? But their dancing was more akin to like what you see in Ethiopia with the shoulder dances and stuff like this,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that can easily be, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
crunking if they get a little bit, you
Yeah.
know, more wicked with it, you know. And I'm not arguing that there was crump in ancient Egypt, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some proto crumping
Yeah,
in ancient Kemet. But because they have the chest pop in the shoulder dances.
So as we're gonna start winding down now, right?
No
But
doubt.
I'm gonna ask you this final question, and I'm sure you've gotten it a lot of times.
All righty.
The word Kemet. What
Yes.
does the word Kemet mean
See,
from your research?
see, and I put my book up too because I wrote a whole book on it.
Okay.
And on the race, it's titled "The Race and Identity of Ancient Egypt," Volume 1. Towards a meaning, towards an etymology of the place name Kemet.
Mhm.
And my research has shown and demonstrated that the word Kemet is just simply a word for country or a place with an abundance of grass and vegetation or water and vegetation.
Mhm.
Right? It's just a topological name. It's not anything special, and so it has nothing to do with the river and the black mud, being left over from the inundation. There's no evidence of that. And most people get that from a misinterpretation of a Greek source,
Mhm.
where they're talking about the pupil of the eye is the same color as the Egyptian soil, and they call the pupil Kim. And so I reanalyzed that, and I
Mhm.
had several Greek scholars look over my analysis, and the vast majority of them, there's only one or two who agreed with the traditional translation, but the others didn't, right? And so I put all those examples in the text, so I'm not being one-sided, and you can see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
opposition to my point.
yeah.
But it's it doesn't mean black people, and that's where I get into a lot of trouble
You
with
broke
folks.
you broke up right there. Say that again.
I'll say. Well, I was saying that I argue that it doesn't mean black people either, and
Mhm.
that the word Kemet itself does not mean black. It has nothing to do with blackness, and that it is a homonym in the language. And so again, you gotta understand that languages have homonyms and homographs. And just because you're used to one word
Mhm.
meaning, or one form of a word meaning this, that doesn't mean every word that has that form has that meaning or derives from that same root. And
Gotcha.
so the problem is that too many people have been looking at this from a layperson's perspective, but not a linguist perspective. So
Mm.
as a linguist, we ask different questions.
Yeah.
And so we know for a fact that words can come to sound alike at a particular time in a language. And so how do we distinguish, or how are we able to detect that this word and this word came to sound alike, but this word has nothing to do with this word,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so that's what the book painstakingly uh, analyzes, and it's been a research project for more than 20 years for me. And so I
Gotcha.
released the book in 2024.
Okay. Okay. Well, brother, thank you much. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for
No
going in
doubt.
depth with it. Um, you have what you got coming up? You say you had something in DC?
Yeah. It's the ASCAC National Conference, and it's going to be held this year in Washington, D.C. at
Mhm.
Roosevelt High School. You can go to ascac.org, ASCAC.org, and there should be links there for, if you're in the area, you want to attend, to purchase, but they are also having uh, parts of it streamed. And so
Mhm.
there is a charge, but you can find it on that website itself. And so, as far as me personally, as usual, I'm working on mini text. So, matter of fact, well, this is the latest thing. This isn't my text, But this is a text that I contributed to, and I don't even know if it's going to show up because
Can't even see it. It's blurred out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well. It is Cheikh Anta Diop's transdisciplinary legacy, impacts on contemporary Africology, which is edited by Victor Ogio Geofor Okafor. And again, you can't see it, but this is the text. It's bluish, so if you see it anyway. But I have a chapter in here called Osiris in the Form of Cheikh Anta Diop. And so this is based upon another conference, which was the Cheikh Anta Diop conference that they held every year in Philadelphia. And so this was based upon a presentation that that I presented at that conference. So Osiris in the Form of Cheikh Anta Diop, what does it mean to be king? So, you know, when I start talking about what does it mean to be king, some of those questions are answered in this text. So I'm chapter 10 in the text, and there's other great scholars, Alefi Asante in here, Dr. Ahmed Bazama, and others, including the editor himself. So yeah, it's a whole bunch going on, but that's the immediate. And then of course I'm working on the Lolo text, and so I'm translating a lot of his articles into English. And there's some other scholars coming out of the Congo who have also contributed to the text. So it's going to be an editor. Yeah, man. That's why I haven't been on HAPI
I feel
as
you.
much as I used to back in the day. So
I feel you. Yeah, we got to get you back on there because
when I actually have something, you know.
Yeah, we'll get you back on there for sure.
No doubt.
But thank you for stopping in, blessing us. Appreciate you. Appreciate your energy, and thank you for all that you do. All right.
I appreciate you for having me, and thank all the viewers and the listeners, and let's all stay in touch.
All right, brother.
Okay.
Peace out. All right. Peace. Okay, happy family. That was Brother Asar Imhotep, blessing us with his findings, his research. Follow him, you know, on his YouTube channel, Facebook, his Instagram. He puts a lot of time, as you can see, he puts a lot of time, a lot of dedication. He's been doing this for years. So check him out on his other platforms. So before I go, just want to talk about this one more time. You have the HAPI in Africa. All right. 3 signature experiences, 1 sacred journey. Come with us to Africa. You can do the package with Senegal, Ghana, Togo. That's August 20th to August 30th. And then you can do Senegal, Morocco, which is August 25th to September 1st. Or you could do the entire package, which is Senegal, Ghana, Togo, and Morocco. Okay, check out the fees on HAPI Tours. Everything is paid for. Once you complete your payment, everything is paid for. Flights, all inclusive, the bus, charter buses, security, everything is paid for. All right, you may just have to come out your pocket for tips or something like that, but that ain't much. All right, so check out HAPI Tours and come with us to Africa. All right. So we see y'all next week, Sunday. Hopefully my partner, Felicia, will be back and she'll grace y'all with her presence. All right. So check y'all later. Stay happy. Peace.
Economics and politics are the foundation of human development.
While forming the world's earliest civilizations, Africans also laid the groundwork for the creation of economic systems.
By learning from our history, we gain the strength to empower the present and design the future. Presenting the premier forum for truth, culture, and change. HAPI Talks. Join us as we unlock the secrets to our success.